seller ID, which is common and correlates to the Ads.txt seller ID. The name of the company that is getting paid for the selling of this inventory, the domain, and the seller type, whether it's an intermediary or publisher or both. So basically, by crossing Ads.txt with sellers JSON DXPs, and even you from time to time can find the shortest path to the inventory. But the problem lies in field 3, which is the relationship types, which is the reseller or the direct. We know that this is a massive loophole. So in the last 18 months, we've been talking to publishers, dozens of publishers, and asking them about this field 3. Do they know what direct really means? Do they know what a reseller means? Not in the general term, but more in the Ads.txt perspective. And not obviously, but frankly, they don't really understand. Most publishers don't really understand the difference. It's very confusing. Direct is something that, most people think it's okay, so it's my relationship with the vendor that I'm in business with, but it's not. Direct actually means that the one that controls the seller ID or the account ID in this Ads.txt line, which most times are the publishers themselves. So being a direct basically means that you're claiming to own this site, you own this domain. Fraudsters know that loophole, and they're sending direct lines, and publishers just implement them because they don't really understand the difference, and because it's very confusing, and it became a total mess. And what happened is that this direct reseller, which was supposed to be a very important field for SPO, it became useless because of all those wrong entries, and because of publishers implementing direct Ads.txt lines without even knowing that they are not supposed to be direct, they were supposed to be resellers. From the buy-side perspective, they couldn't find the shortest path to the inventory. They couldn't agree or understand exactly who are they buying from and what is the relationship. And that became a huge problem. So basically, Ads.txt 1.1 is here to solve that loophole. It's here to enable DSPs to find the shortest path to the inventory. They want to really, I would say, go around that field 3, even though it's still important and we still need to correct it. We'll talk about it in a few minutes. But they want to find a different path to understand who is the direct, who is the owner of the domain, and who are the main sellers or the majority of the inventory they're selling. So 2 new values are added. One is owner domain and one is manager domain. And so I'll take you through in the next couple of slides, so what exactly is owner domain, what exactly is manager domain, and we'll speak about the different use cases. So owner domain is quite simple. We'll start with that. It basically specifies the business domain of the business entity that owns the domain, the site, or the app. It should basically be the same value as the seller domain in all publisher entries in the seller's JSON files of all the exchanges that you are working with. So for all of you publishers here in our audience, please note that it is recommended to add owner domain to all of your Ads.txt files, even if you have only one, because DSPs will look at this value and will monitor it and will crawl it. And let's see an example. So this is not a regular case, okay? It's a very common case, but it's not a regular case. The regular case is I have one website, I have one domain, I just add an owner domain, I add myself. But what happens in case that you're a company that owns multiple domains? So in this case, we see the domain, which is screenrant.com. And this is a domain that belongs to a company called Valnet Inc. And you can see here the line that they have with AppNexus 9444, which is the seller ID, and the relationship is direct because they own this domain. And on ScreenRant, they are direct. They are the owners of the domain. So what should ScreenRant or Valnet add in their Ads.txt file? You can see here in the yellow, owner domain equals valnetinc.com. And valnetinc.com equals the domain in the seller's JSON file of AppNexus. Okay, so basically when you're adding the owner domain value, it makes it very easy for buyers to understand who actually owns the domain, who is the parent company. Manager domain. manager domain is more tricky. And here I think it's very important to pay attention. The manager domain is the primary or exclusive monetization partner of the publisher's inventory, meaning that the owner of the site does not manage the monetization at all, probably, either globally or in a specific country. And this is very interesting because you can either be working with a monetization partner that monetize your domain, and you can work them globally on all of your geography, or you can work them on a specific country and then mention it in the manager domain. And the recommendation, and this is important, is only use manager domain if a majority of your inventory is managed by a single entity. And we'll speak about it later, and I'm sure that you're probably thinking, but I work with multiple monetization partners. Many partners are monetizing my inventory, so how do I know which one of them is my manager domain? And we'll speak about it in a second. So here we see an example of Freestar. So Freestar, this is their Ads.txt file, and this is one of the domains that work with Freestar. Freestar is a very big ad operations company. They own hundreds of domains. And this is an Ads.txt file of one of the domains that they are monetizing. So in this case, they should add a value of manager domain equals freestar.com. And it also relevant to AdThrive, Cafe Media, Mediavine, other ad operations company that you know of. All of them, all of you, if you're here, should add manager domain equals your company domain. So this is a very simple use case that I just mentioned. A publisher is monetizing their inventory through an exclusive monetization partner. So the publisher itself doesn't have any direct seats. They don't work directly with exchanges. They only use one monetization partner. So in this case, the monetization partner is equal the manager domain. So we prepared a few slides just to explain the basic use case. So I'll just read them through, and you'll have the deck later so you can pass it on to your team and use it yourself when you ask yourself, what is the manager domain for you? So the first question is, do I work with a third-party partner that monetizes my inventory? If the question is no, so no manager domain, just add an owner domain and that's it. If you do work with a third-party partner that monetizes your inventory, does this partner primarily or exclusively monetizes the majority of your inventory? So the majority, I mean, they don't say exactly, like the IB Tech Lab, if you look at the specs, they don't say exactly how many is the majority, but I would say at least 80% of the inventory of the website. If it's not, so don't put any manager domain. And I think this is the place where you need to be careful. And we'll speak about it in later on as well. But if it's not a primarily or exclusively partner that monetizes your inventory, don't add them as a manager domain because it has consequences in terms of SPO and how buyers are looking at the inventory. If they do, great. Manager domain is that third-party partner domain, and it should match their entry on the matching sellers JSON files, which is very important. How do I know when I set a manager domain for a specific geo? So it's basically the same flow, it's the same questions, but for a specific geo. So if you have a different partner in the UK, or a different partner in France, or in Australia, or in the US, so you can specify a manager domain for each geo, which can be very convenient and very important because sometimes we know that there are different partners in different continents or regions or countries or geos. So let's dive deeper into all kinds of questions and use cases. I've written here, and I have the link at the end of a presentation that you'll get. You can also go into the IB Tech Lab specs. At the end of the 24 pages that are pretty long, there's a publisher guidance, and there are some very useful tips and answers to the most common use cases that you need to know about. So for example, if you are both an owner and a seller, what do you do? So first of all, it is highly recommended, which means you should do it, that you publish owner domains so that buyers can tell the difference between your owned inventory and the resold inventory. Okay, it's important for them to understand your entity and what do you do. Like if you have the domain that you're the owner, write that you're the owner there, add the value. If you have the domains that you are the manager domain, that you resell their inventory, so write it down. I mean, they want to understand the supply path better, so and they will reward the publishers that are doing so and the companies. Another recommendation, when it's possible, to separate your selling seats. So although this update is only about Ads.txt, there are some recommendations here about the seller's JSON and how to behave with the different exchanges that you work with. So it is very recommended that if you have, again, you're also an owner of websites or domains, and you're also a seller, so separate the accounts. Have an account, a seller ID for the domains that you own and monetize, and a seller ID for the domains that you sell and resell their traffic. Manage your domain, as I said, only use it as if the majority of your inventory is managed by a single entity. And I think this is where I want to explain why is that important, because it has SPO implications. So for example, if the same inventory is available through multiple sellers, I mean, you can think about the buy side and the DSP that is getting the ad call. So they're getting an ad call from, for example, the Magnite seat, and they're getting it from seller A and seller B. So first thing they will check, is this seller is the owner domain or is it the manager domain? And if they're getting multiple requests from others, so they will probably treat the other non-manager accounts as reseller entries. So this is why it's important to define it as properly, because the manager domain will give a great advantage to the seller, to the monetization partner that you're working with. And if they're not monetizing the majority of your website, it could create SPO problems for you and for your monetization. Beware on conflicting manager domain entries. One of the things that we know and we see when we talk to publishers, and that most of the times they're getting Ads.txt lines from partners, and sometimes unfortunately they don't really know, they trust their partners and they don't validate those Ads.txt lines. We had a survey when we asked publishers, do you validate your Ads.txt lines before you implemented them? And 47% told us that they don't validate them at all. They just copy the file, they copy the lines and paste them into their Ads.txt files. So this is where you should be very, very careful. You should make sure that there's no manager domain, or I hope not, owner domain in those entries, in those lines that you're getting. And the other thing is that you need to make sure, and it's a great opportunity, is that there's no direct there. The only direct line should be your own seat with that partner, and all the rest of the lines should be reseller. Okay, this is, again, it's a great opportunity to make sure this is happening, because if there will be conflicting manager domains as written here, they will likely be ignored by the consumers of this information, which are the DSPs and also validators, anti-fraud solutions, and so on. So you should be very careful not to implement more than one manager domain entry. The owner domain is just the publisher. I think this is very, very simple, but it's very important to pay attention to. The publisher or the owner company, the parent company, as I mentioned earlier. No one else is supposed to be mentioned in the owner domain variable. This is an opportunity, as I said, just to validate the new Ads.txt line to make sure that they don't include any unwanted entries of the new variable or misrepresented direct sellers or relationship types. We have a tool. We have the wizard on Seller's Guide. It's free. It's pretty easy. You can just go into Seller's Guide. There's a link here and you can search it on our site as well. You can just, with a simple few steps, you can clean up your Ads.txt file. You can go over your sellers list. You can look at them, see if you know them all. I mean, we know that there are many hidden sellers and that are hiding in Ads.txt files. We know that many of those sellers are sending direct lines. So this is a great opportunity to create new Ads.txt lines, to clean them up and to better protect yourself from fraud and from the fraudsters that are exploiting those loopholes. We're almost done. we'll send you the PDF and the presentation right after the webinar. You can go visit those links. You can write all the specs, the implementation guide. You have the Seller's Guide wiki and FAQs, and you can also clean up your Ads.txt with the wizard. And just one note about our upcoming project, the State of Transparency report. It will be launched next week. We're very excited about it. So I'll just say that stay tuned. So thank you for listening, and I think I'll just answer some questions now. I see that I already have some in my Q&A box. Okay. I see that some of them already added. Okay. So I'll just answer the last one, the first one. Does your Ads.txt cleanup work for Ads.txt? This is a good question. And yeah, we are getting asked that I think every time we go live to a webinar. So it will be, it's not currently, Seller's Guide currently is not supporting Ads.txt. We will support it on the first quarter of 2023. We actually plan to do it this quarter, but Ads.txt 1.1 kind of changed our plans, to be honest. I think it's a very important change and we want to implement it into our tool as well. So no, we're currently not supporting it. Okay, what key points do publishers need to know regarding SPO? So I think this is a different topic. It's a very important one to understand how buyers are conducting SPO and how they're looking at the supply chain from their perspective. I think that I can tell here about the specific update about Ads.txt 1.1 is that I think that what you need to know is that they are looking and they are reading all of those Ads.txt lines and all their variables. The SSPs are not, by the way. The SSPs are only checking if there is an Ads.txt file, yes or no. And if there is not an Ads.txt file, if there is, where they're just checking that their line is authorized, that their Ads.txt seller ID of their seller that they are getting the ad call from is authorized, and that's it. But DSPs are more and more looking into the relationship. SPO, the supply chain is getting more murky, complicated. So they need to find the most direct path to the inventory. And you can see that also with the Open Path initiative by the TriDesk. And my guess is that we'll see more and more like this. Okay. Let me see. We have some more questions. Do you plan on a tool for printing the results of validating Ads.txt lines? I'm not sure I get it, but I think that if you'll try the wizard, you will see that the end of the wizard, the end of the cleanup process there is getting a new Ads.txt file to your email. So this is kind of like printing for me. I'm not sure I got it right, but you can clean up the Ads.txt and get a new file to your email and then just try and use it, validate it again and see what you want to, if you want to implement it or not, and see how your transparency score is improving, which is a great. Okay, how to define the direct or reseller from pub side. So we have a great slides on the direct versus reseller. You can write me later on and I can send it to you. How do I know what the direct seller is, and how do I know which seller is supposed to be a reseller, which seller is supposed to be direct? So I can send it to you later. Basically, like I said, direct is only the publisher itself. Only the seller that is behind the seller ID is only the publisher itself or the ad ops company that is working with, like the monetization, the major monetization partner. And this is it. All the others should be reseller. When the owner and manager fields will be required fields by IAB. So they are already required the minute they release the specifications. So it means that they are required. I think the right question is, when will DSPs start to enforce it? And for this question, I don't have an answer. My guess is that it will happen pretty soon. I think in a month or two. I think they're already checking it from what I know from the programmatic supply chain working group that I'm part of. I think they're already checking it. They're already monitoring the implementation rate, and they will start enforcing it very soon. So my guess, the first enforcer will be the trade desk for sure. They're very active in this initiative. They're very active in this change. So I will look at what the trade desk is buying from me and try to see if there is any change. But I wouldn't wait. I would just add the whole field, and because they will enforce it very soon. Okay. What does the new standard go into action? When? Oh, okay. So I think it's kind of like the same question. How quickly we recommend do the changes? I think as soon as possible. Let me just see if there's anything else. Okay, so there's a question here about subdomains, which can be very interesting, I think, for many people. In situations where entity A has exclusive right to inventory on subdomain belonging to entity B, is it correct to assume that the declaration on the subdomain Ads.txt file should be manager domain equals entitya.com? Entity A exclusive rights to inventory. Yes. Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, if they have the exclusive right to the inventory, yeah, so absolutely, yeah, it's supposed to be a manager domain equals entity A. Yeah. Yes. The question is yes. Okay. So just to confirm, there's only one owner and or one manager domain for each domain monetized. Yes. Only one. One manager domain, one order domain. Let me see if there's anything else here. Okay. What happens if a network, a reseller, does not appear as manager domain on the inventory they resell once it is reinforced? Nothing happens. I mean, DSPs will still buy from resellers. Premise is a reseller. Premise is an intermediary. We monetize video for our publishers. We give them a video discovery solution. We are a reseller. We'll keep being a reseller. I think that as long as you're a network or a reseller that provides value to the supply chain and publishers working with you and your relationship type is reseller, it's perfectly fine. I mean, I think the DSPs will keep buying. The fact that there is a manager domain will hurt the ones that are misdeclaring themselves as direct. The ones that are misrepresenting themselves as direct. Those are the ones that will be hurt when the enforcement will begin, because what the DSPs will do is that they will treat them as resellers, which is what they are, and they might even limit or block their inventory because they're pretending to be direct, even though they're resellers. So this is something that it will hurt them. If you're a reseller, if you're a network and your lines are completely compliant with the specs, so no problem at all. Okay. Wait just a sec. I think I'll stop sharing. Thanks, Yael. Okay. If a seller's JSON is listing the website domain and not our company domain, should we ask them to change it? We don't control this file, obviously. Yes, you should ask them to change it. One of the things, and I think I've mentioned it, is that even though this initiative is not about seller's JSON, it will impact seller's JSON entries because it will require a company to make sure that the website domain is mentioned the right way on the seller's JSON file. You need to validate, and you need to ask the SSPs or the exchanges to change it if it's not the right domain. Absolutely, because the whole idea is the crossing between those entries, between the Ads.txt files and the seller's JSON files. Okay, one last question, I think, before we're done. And if you have anything else, just let me know. Does the owner domain and manager domain belongs in Ads.txt file of the seller's JSON file? So I think there's a mix up here. the owner domain and manager domain are only in the Ads.txt file. Sellers JSON files belong to the exchanges. They belong to the SSPs. They put it on live, they manage it, and they decide when they start working with a new publisher or a new intermediary, they update the entries there. So sellers JSON files are only for the SSPs, and they manage it. Okay, I think we're done. Just let me look for one last time. I have more questions here on the side. Oh, okay. So I think another question which is very important and I like to answer is if I'm the exclusive monetization partner for a specific ad unit, am I considered a manager domain? Okay, so for example, Premise can be the exclusive monetization partner for video for the partners, for the publishers, or Tabula can be the exclusive monetization partner for native on some publisher website. Are they considered to be a manager domain? And the answer is no. Okay, there's no manager domains by inventory type. And this is important because today some of those monetization partners are, I would say, convincing publishers that they are supposed to be direct because they are the only partner or the only seller that is monetizing this specific inventory. But still, according to the specs and according to this new update, those are not supposed to be direct. They're not supposed to be manager domain. They will be resellers and they will resell this inventory. Okay, there was a big conversation around manager domain by inventory type, by video, by display, by native, all of that. But the answer, and it's also, by the way, it's also in the specifications themselves. The IB wrote it down to say that we're not going to deal with inventory type. It's only manager domain or manager domain by geo. Okay, so I think we're done. Thank you so much for joining. We'll send you the deck. We're here to help. If you have any questions, if you want to reach out and things are not clear yet, you think you have some kind of like an edge use case or anything like that, feel free to write to us. You have my email in the presentation. You can write us on LinkedIn, Twitter, whatever is comfortable for you, and best of luck. See you on our next webinar.
Recording stopped.